Hello Team FD and welcome back to Sunday Vibes, where we are self-isolating in the pub, all on theme. Anyway, let's just ignore all the stuff, negative stuff at large, and just proceed to talk rubbish about football for the next 40, 50 minutes.
Let's do it.
I'm sure a welcome distraction for the fine people at home. Right, we're not talking about good things, we're talking about bad things. Shock horror we've taken. The negative approach on this week's Sunday Vibes. The question comes from Eli Petit with 4 T's, excessive. He said, for a headline topic, who are the players most in decline at the moment in the Premier League?
Ooh.
Let's extend this to teams and managers too. And of course, if you're tuning in and inexplicably you aren't subscribed, please hit that red button right now and turn notifications on to never miss an episode of Sunday Vibes. Seeing as Spurs and Manchester United is today, shall we start with Spurs? That feels like fertile ground for this question, Pat. And is there any players in particular you want to identify, or perhaps the manager? Not rehearsed.
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because first, I think you've got to make a distinction between somebody having a down year and someone being in decline. So I think there are lots of players who are having a down year or a down part of the season. So Raheem Sterling hasn't been great lately. Jamie Vardy's had a bad stretch. Lacazette's had a bad year altogether. But I wouldn't say, I mean, you'd expect Vardy to be in decline overall, but I wouldn't talk about them as being in decline in a larger sense.
It's not terminal, okay.
Whereas at Spurs, I think that it's very clear that that defence has reached the end of its life. Like, when Spurs were at their best, people used to talk about them like they were really this exciting attacking side, which I think was mostly down to, they were exciting, don't get me wrong, but they weren't really an attacking team. Kane scored a lot of goals, but other than that, their success was always built to me on this really high energy pressing, which actually was primarily defensive pressing. Their defence was absolutely incredible for about 3 years running in the middle of this decade. And they had a phenomenal centre-back pairing in Vertonghen and Alderweireld, and obviously Lloris behind them, who also I think was always an underrated keeper. Now, all 3 of those guys are very clearly approaching the end. Vertonghen physically is not up to it anymore.
Particularly at left back as well, right?
Well, yeah, that is... Well, yeah, except
5 appearances at left back.
Yeah, though when he plays left back, I think it's a little bit misleading to think of him as playing like a normal fullback. Like Mourinho's always done that thing with fullbacks, right, where he has one stay in reserve and defend, who's almost an auxiliary centre back, and then he has another one bomb forward.
That
in
lopsided approach, done it since Porto.
So Vertonghen's still quite reserved when he plays left back, but obviously covering so much more space, it is still difficult. Alderweireld still remains like an absolutely fantastic defender, and really the only thing that holds that defence together. But injuries just keep coming for him again and again and again, chipping away at him. And Lloris, I think Lloris is actually much maligned, but his reaction time seems to have slowed a little bit. Had a bad game in the Champions League in the week, and these games feel like they're getting closer and closer together.
How do these numbers sit with you? 4.5 saves per 90 is a club career high. Of course, they are facing a lot of traffic at the moment.
A lot of shots.
But he does have the second highest save percentage in the Premier League, helped by the fact he's only made 12 appearances, I guess. Like you said, injuries taking their toll. But when he does play, he seems to keep the Wolves at bay. Is he coming in for more criticism than you'd expect? Is that narrative, that error-prone narrative followed him round a little bit too much, perhaps? Or
I think that what happens in football is people get an idea in their head. And so a lot of people with Lloris, when he was still very good, a load of people started saying he was overrated. And then when he had like a bit of a down season, everyone was still like, well, Lloris is hugely overrated. And it just becomes conventional wisdom, like it's the kind of contrarian opinion that people have without actually really thinking that much. Like, don't get me wrong, like, I think that he deserves criticism for things he's done in the past, but actually last season he was phenomenal. And this narrative was still being peddled about how he was overrated. It's not really the case.
Yeah.
Like, all keepers make mistakes in the course of seasons. Like Ederson has, Alisson has, like every keeper you can think of has. But, and even Oblak this season, actually, like Oblak, people are still talking about him as one of the best keepers in the world. He's been really bad on set pieces this season for Atletico Madrid.
he's a bloody lovely bloke, though, I'll tell you that for sure.
Well,
Give me a hug after Unfiltered. A hug.
He could have
Can't do that now, can we?
Could have infected.
Have to shake hands with feet. Yeah. Well, I mean, unlike other top goalkeepers, the ones you've just mentioned, in elite sides, I mean, he is facing a disproportionate amount of traffic. 14.4 shots per 90 is the 6th worst in the Prem. So, is this defence, the names you've mentioned, are they rapidly decreasing ability-wise, or are they just facing so much traffic that any issue is exacerbated at the moment, Doogie?
Well, it seems like a combination. I don't think their midfield has offered enough protection this year as well. I don't think Winks is ever set up to do that job particularly well. I think he needs to play alongside a defensive midfielder, ideally. And then I think he can be a perfectly able Premier League player. I don't think he's going to be a great by any stretch. And then Ben Davies.
Itching to chip in there.
Ben Davies had a very poor
like
campaign. Ben Davies had a very poor campaign at left back as well. Serge Aurier is very fun going forward and like really useful going forward, but a liability at the back as well. So there's so many issues across that defence. And then thank goodness for the emergence of Tanganga. I mean, he's made a couple of mistakes recently, but he's probably been their most consistent left centre-back since coming into the side. So I feel like Spurs are probably facing the costs of their indecision not to sell or move on Vertonghen or Alderweireld a couple of years ago when they could have got very good money for them and replace at least Vertonghen. Because that situation around his contract, that situation around the club has sort of developed all throughout the season. I think it really has destabilised them at massive points. And Vertonghen doesn't look anywhere near his old self. But there's nothing wrong with ageing out. I mean, I agree with Pat, both of them have probably been in the top 5 centre-backs the last decade in the Premier League. I think we even put Vertonghen in the team of the decade.
Vertonghen's been there for 9 years. I was really shocked when doing some preliminary research for this. Crazy.
I think it was 7 mil.
He's 33 in April. And actually, when I looked at his numbers, they're still okay. Like tackles and interceptions, 3.7. He's dribbled around 0.6 times a game, which doesn't sound astronomical, but it is 3 times higher than when Spurs came third in 15-16. It's his second worst season. So it's there, but nothing untoward, right? There's nothing beyond the natural aging process, at least from an underlying numbers perspective. I think we probably, like you said, need to give him a little bit more of a break. Alderweireld would sign that contract until 2023. How important is he to Jose Mourinho's team? Seems to be holding it together at times, Pat.
Well, yeah, though he has been benched a couple of times recently. I don't know. I actually think Mourinho is a larger issue here because fundamentally, like, he's complained so much about the weaknesses in their squad and the injuries that they've had, but the injuries have been mostly congregated towards the front end of the pitch. Like, he also let Danny Rose go out on loan in January, and I understand Danny Rose wasn't happy, but at the same time, like, one of your jobs as a new manager at the club is to try and convince a player like that to stay, who would clearly improve them if he was playing in the team now. He also went out and got a midfielder, admittedly on loan, in Jedson Fernandez in January, but he could have looked for a more defensive midfield player. And so I just kind of think like...
Is that because you don't particularly rate Eric Dyer or Harry Winks in that capacity? Because of course he was coveted. Eric Dyer was coveted by Mourinho at Manchester United. So
he started his first few games.
Well, he's had to play Dyer at centre back a decent amount. I mean, I don't actually mind Dyer. I don't know what his level is now, but he doesn't really. He seems like a bit of an in-betweener. I feel like I haven't seen enough of him at defensive midfield to make a judgment. Harry Winks is just not a defensive midfielder. Like, Harry Winks will do some defending every now and then, but he is incredibly bad at defending in open space. The reason you get Harry Winks in your side is because he's a good volume passer. He gets on the ball a lot and he passes. He doesn't pass forward a huge amount, but he doesn't pass backward a huge amount as well. He's like a pretty decent ball progressor and he can move forward a little bit. So in a game where you're going to have loads of possession, I think he's fine to have in the side. What he's never ever going to do is provide solidity in the midfield. And this has come at the same time as Ndombele's having fitness issues because of the issues with Kane and Son and Bergwijn now. They have to push Lo Celso forward to get more shots out of him. That means less defensive work out of him. So there are a lot of things kind of coming together, causing problems.
Where's he going to play Ndombele moving forward? Because he has kind of stuck with this 4-2-3-1, and of course Ndombele probably better in a 4-3-3, given a bit more attacking licence.
Really?
But then,
what's the difference between playing him in a 4-2-3-1 and playing in a 4-3-3? He's not like an attacking mid who like.
But without a lights-out defensive midfielder, which we've talked about, like, who's going to do the bulk of that defensive work?
But if you were to say,
I think get a DM in and then play Ndombele as a freer role.
But if you want to get Ali and Lo Celso in the side, if you want to do that,
well, that's my issue, Ali.
Then you kind of want to play. Then you should probably play Ali at 10 because he's not going to play in the deeper midfield role. Lo Celso has played in a central midfield role and been sensational there. Like, and then you have 2 midfielders, neither of whom is an out-and-out defensive midfielder, but both of whom put up big defensive numbers. So, for instance, if you have like Ndombele and Lo Celso both put up over 4 tackles and interceptions per game, like quite easily during their career. If you have both of those in a 2-man midfield, that's a lot of defensive work. You don't need a guy who's just a destroyer.
But then with Ali
and
a
actually,
bit
he
of
didn't play. He didn't play on the left of the midfield three when he was at Lyon and Ndombele. Like Aouar played there. I don't know. Like he can get forward a lot, but he's always done a lot of defensive work. And I think
perhaps not seen that version of him in the Premier League yet.
I don't know. I think earlier in the season we did. I think earlier in the season you were seeing plenty of defensive work out of him and plenty of ball progression. Now what you're seeing is somebody who looks like he needs to have surgery or at least have a few weeks out, and they just don't. They do not have that luxury at the moment. And Gedson Fernandes was brought in as I don't know. He's a central midfielder. He's kind of a box-to-box midfielder, but then he's
on the right of a flat 4.
And so now you're kind of like, what was this guy brought in to be?
I totally agree that Ndombele doesn't look fit. I've got nothing but sympathy for him if he's not fit. But that game against Burnley, they had Winks and not Skip, just Winks on the bench. So if Ndombele is that injured and needs to be out for a long period of time, unless there's pressure from the club to carry on playing, which there might be, but I'm not privy to that, then he needs to say, I cannot play, because playing as 60% Ndombele is better than a lot of midfielders, particularly on the ball. But his lack of defensive output at the moment is really harming them. And his lack of showing for the ball, I mean, everyone's probably seen that clip that Sky Sports put out about he just doesn't look fit to go around the pitch and receive the ball, and he looks completely crestfallen. He looks a bit broken, to be honest, off the ball. On the ball, he still looks fantastic. So I've got sympathy for him if he's not fully fit, but you've got to stop playing him then.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That I completely agree. But this is the thing, and I think Mourinho has a bad track record for this over the course of his career, continuing basically putting pressure on players by calling them out publicly and saying oh, he doesn't want to play through pain, he doesn't understand that that's something you've got to do, blah blah blah. And actually, Spurs have a bad track record on this as well, because Kane has continually come back from injury earlier than he should have. Every time he's been ruled out, and impartial observers like medical experts have said he'll probably be out for 6 weeks. He comes back after 4. He should be out for 2 months. He comes back after 6 weeks. He's done this again and again and again. And I think even if you're the biggest Harry Kane believer in the world, you've got to accept that he has lost mobility. He has got persistent injury problems, which seem to be a product of him never getting over these ankle injuries from a couple of years ago. So it just seems to me like there's an atmosphere of you have to play if you're even part-way fit, especially because at the moment, the alternative is playing Skip. I don't know, it just seems like they're really rolling the dice on somebody's future. And if I were Ndombele, I would absolutely say, no, I'm not going to play. And if Mourinho doesn't like that, then that's Mourinho's problem.
Yeah, but Mourinho, with his determination to win and his win at all cost attitude, I don't know whether he would play a 60% fit midfielder at this end of the season. I know they've got injury issues, but you're just harming your team's chances. I think it must be twofold. I don't know whether Ndombele's...
Well, even if your alternative is 18-year-old Oliver Skip, because also you don't know necessarily if he's 60%, right? So most of the time with an injured player, you rely on that player telling you, I'm in pain, I've got a hamstring issue, or I've got a stomach issue, or whatever it is. So if Ndombele feels like he needs to say that he's available, even if he is in pain, then Mourinho is going to be kind of well, I know he's in pain. I know that he should probably not be playing, but he's available. I'm going to play him. Mourinho, we all think that there's this exact percentage of fitness. Oh, he's 60%. Oh, he's 75% or whatever. Whereas actually, normally, with a player, you're just relying on him telling the medical staff, and the medical staff saying to Mourinho, this is the situation. And then Mourinho, I think, probably, based on his track record, ignoring it and saying, if he's fit, I'm going to play him over Skip.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, that would make sense, but I've got no idea.
I mean, those sort of players are indispensable in the Jose Mourinho system, aren't they? Because of his... I think the word pragmatic is used far too much when describing Jose Mourinho's football, because particularly early on, at Porto, at Chelsea...
Ugly is the word.
I don't even think it was ugly. I think at times Porto played spectacular football, but they did have fluid front threes with individual talents like Deco, who could fix multiple problems, right? And now it feels like Lo Celso could be that guy for him, because traditionally Jose Mourinho's sides, you could almost divide them on the pitch, couldn't you, into the defensive unit and the attacking unit, and it relies on a lights-out, creative playmaker at the base of midfield to kind of join those things together, or like I said, a very fluid, willing front three. And I do sympathise with him that he's not got a lot of options, and this is perhaps a manager who's not as good at the moment at creating new situations, developing new scenarios. Do we think that Jose Mourinho will ever reach the levels he once did, and what is preventing him from doing that? So when people say he's outdated, he'll never, reach that level of the Champions League again. He's lost X amount of Champions League knockout games. What are your thoughts on that? Is he just down and out, or is he out?
I think when he was appointed, I think I freely said that I didn't agree with the appointment. I didn't think it was the right move for Spurs. I didn't think it was the right move for their plan over the next 3 years, the rebuild that needs to be done. But he's routinely spent over 100 million in his first summer in charge, and unless he's going to be given that sort of backing to completely regenerate a side, particularly in that defensive area, and add more forward depth, then I can only see it going one way with Levy. But I would give him some credit in the fact they were 14th when he took over. They were in relegation form. I think it was 25 points from 24. Like, they'd had an awful back end of last year as well, so it wasn't just a weird period under Pochettino. Like, the club were in decline. Pochettino freely admitted, he was like, we've got the best house, but we've got no furniture. Like, he knew the squad needed a lot of work. Do I think Mourinho can take them back to the heights in the Champions League? It's difficult to see, but I don't know whether you don't necessarily have to play in a certain style of football to get through in knockout competitions. Look at Diego Simeone's Atletico Madrid. So I wouldn't hammer him necessarily for his style of play. The worrying thing, more to me, is his man management, is his way he controls the culture around a club, the sort of messages he sends to his players.
Which is weird, because
they're dated over his style of football.
For the first half of his career, he was very progressive in that sense. I only referenced Porto there, but Porto, Chelsea, Inter Milan, Real Madrid, there was this siege mentality. He was very cerebral, wasn't he? He didn't let his kind of emotions spill out into the media, at least when it concerned his own players. And now it seems like he can't help himself in that regard. Like he has to pick out a player who's responsible for whatever's kind of unfurled.
I think Real Madrid's started to change him there. I think that was the time where he realised that he was not the biggest figure at the club, and that there were factions within the squad that he kind of needed to, I don't know, not necessarily cater to, but he understood that there were people who had the ear of the president, and he needed to make sure they were happy or he would be in trouble. So when he came back to Chelsea, then we started to see him feuding with players. Man United, it got worse. Spurs, it's already happening. Yeah, I mean, I always have found that a little bit disappointing with Mourinho, because he was great at that in the early days. Like, Mourinho would go out there and say literally anything he needed to, however dishonest, to the press to defend his players. And now he doesn't care. He never ever accepts any fault himself. Even if he just came out and said, yeah, I got my tactics wrong, but we are having problems with personnel at the moment, I would understand. I mean, this season though, to be clear, I give him very little credit for improving Spurs' position since he came in, but I also give him relatively little blame for how they're doing now.
Okay,
I think that because of the way things were going under Pochettino, though I think Pochettino's an amazing manager, I think the players looked like they had quit to some degree when they lost 3-0 to Brighton. I mean, come on. I think that at that point, often what changes things is not the new manager coming in so much as the old manager going out. So I think that helped things at the beginning. More than Mourinho kind of instituting some great style of play. But I also think that now there is relatively little he can do. He doesn't have the personnel to kind of to do a bunch of defensive possession, and a really dull possession style, which actually probably would be the thing to do given that you've lost these attackers. He obviously doesn't have the attackers to play a high octane, let's outscore you style.
Or the fullbacks to launch these counter-attacks.
There's very little he can do at the moment, so I really don't blame him for how the season's going now.
So currently 8th.
Doogie's right, that's the issue.
Currently 8th. You pointed out there, they were 14th when he took over. Expected points has them at 12th. So that improvement was marked at first, I guess, at least on a results basis, maybe not a culture or performance basis, but certainly on the results end of things. And it's just kind of been slowly chipped away, hasn't it? That initial bump has been chipped away at for the last few weeks. Yeah, and I think their expected goals conceded is, I think, back to where it started.
I think it might have gone slightly beyond it, because it was bad, and then it got a lot better, and now it's got way worse again. Whereas the attack has stayed fairly constant until recently, when basically everyone in the attack died.
I mean, they've conceded 40 expected goals, thinks they should have conceded 44, which would rank them the 7th worst in the league.
Since Mourinho came in, of the Premier League clubs, the only team to have conceded more goals in all competitions than Spurs on 38 is Aston Villa on 42. So it's not only that they're second, it's that Aston Villa are only 4 goals worse off than them. And Aston Villa's defence is truly abominable. So I just don't...
Well, I think that's a little bit silly because Aston Villa haven't played RB Leipzig, and neither of the teams around them. But I do see your point.
Yeah, but I mean, the schedule hasn't been totally even in other regards as well. You know, like so Aston Villa have had like, I don't know, they played City in the Carabao Cup, for example. Like, I mean, it's impossible to kind of like line it up exactly, but that is quite worrying. And I do have concerns about what he's going to want to do in the summer, because to me, the exciting thing about Spurs, what you were asking before about will he get back to the level he was before? Probably not. However, if you fixed problems in the squad, would Spurs be a lot better? Obviously, yes. Like, he's not an incompetent manager.
Yeah.
However, his lifespan, I think, is getting shorter and shorter at clubs now. And if in the course of these, you know, maybe 2 years that he ends up being there, if he alienates Ndombele to the point that Spurs sell that player, or if he plays Ndombele through injury to the point that Ndombele no longer has the future in the game we thought he would, then that has been a hugely costly appointment, in addition to the huge amount of money they're spending on having Mourinho there in the first place.
Do you think, though, that he's going to benefit, or how we will judge him will benefit from, and the barometer for success is now lower, isn't it? No one expects him to win a Champions League now. I think people would call him a success at Spurs if he brought silverware to that club. So I think the yardstick
It depends what it is, though. Is a
Carabao
Cup and
at the moment
I actually think any silverware. Like, so that
you think next season, if they finish outside the Champions League spots this season, and they did that again next season but won the Carabao Cup, you think they take that?
I don't necessarily think that's the right point of view, or do I? I mean, it would at least change the really boring narrative that's always hammered home. That's, you know, no matter how much progress Spurs have made, they've never won this, and that's not, the culture's not going to change until they win, you know, said trophy. But I actually think if he won a trophy before leaving in the next 2 years, it would be quite easy for fans to forgive him of an awful lot of shortcomings, and he would probably get away with his period being described as a success. Do you think that would be the case, Dukes?
I'm kind of with you. I think Spurs fans just want that trophy. That's why they've appointed Mourinho. I think it's quite silly in terms of long-term planning, because he's never been necessarily the one to sort of integrate a new generation through a club. He's always sort of added stardust on top of it. And actually, if you appointed the right manager, say if they got a Nagelsmann in at some point in the next year or two, there's actually a really good crop of young players in that squad. Ali, Lo Celso, Ndombele, Bergwijn, Tanganga now as well. They need to regenerate the defence, but like, it's not a disaster, Spurs. Looking at their squad, it's really not, particularly in midfield. Like, there's a real range of ability.
Outrageous.
There's a real range of skill sets in there, and I think if you got the combination right,
do you worry about their progress stagnating then because Jose Mourinho isn't, in the sense that Nagelsmann would, going to coach them to be better footballers? He's going to coach them how to win.
Yeah, potentially, and I just think it was the wrong appointment. On as Pat says, like, you can't forget the money he's on as well. Like, it just hasn't said, when Spurs players have complained seemingly behind the scenes for years about their own pay, and I think that has actually become a factor, and then you've just sacked the manager that sort of took that group of players as far as he could, and that was the point, to keep the journey going and not just go like, oh, we'll get Mourinho because he last won a trophy in 2017. Like, it doesn't make any sense that because he won a Europa League and a Carabao Cup at United that he'll be the perfect fit for Spurs. I don't think he is.
It is positive, though, that the players that they've brought in since he was appointed have not been the classic Mourinho, like, I want my guys who are 30. They brought in a 22-year-old Bergwijn, I think he's turned 23 now, actually, and Jedson Fernandes, who's 20, right? Like, that to me is like pretty positive.
Yeah, so he ceded some power on that end of things.
Well, who knows? Like, maybe those were the players he wanted. Maybe Spurs said, look, if you come in, we're going to pay you like your full wage, but we're going to have break clauses in your contract, and you're going to basically get told who we sign. You'll get a say, but this is who we get. And as a result, that means that while Mourinho can do damage to squad morale, and he can do damage to position in the table, and he can take a huge amount of money out of the club, what he can't do is completely sign away the future of the club in favour of the present. Like, regardless of what he does in the next couple of seasons, like, the squad is going to be young and probably get better as those players develop.
Okay, fair. Right, so we've spoke about Spurs for perhaps long enough there. I'm sure there's some people screaming at the screen for us to progress. So let's do the best of the rest. Let's go around Europe then. And we've identified 3 candidates in our sort of rush preparation. Lyon, Eintracht, Frankfurt and Atletico Madrid. Feels a bit redundant talking about Atletico Madrid because there's such a wave of positivity around them at the moment, unless you're Michael Owen. So who do you want to talk about first, Doogie? Lyon or Eintracht?
I think Eintracht's probably a tiny bit more interesting because a couple of years ago they were a mid-table German side. I think they finished 16th and 11th. They then got Kovac in. He took them to 8th. They then won a German Cup against beating Bayern. He then got the Bayern job. And they appointed a really exciting manager in Adi Hütter.
We liked that, didn't we?
I thought young boys. Great. Exactly. The sort of person that Spurs could have looked at. Anyway, RB Salzburg, young boys he did very well at as well. I think they had quite a good run in the Europa League. And last year, managed to improve on that. They finished 7th. They had a fantastic front line. And he lost all that talent this summer. Jovic, Haller, Rebic then went as well. And this year, there has been a drop-off, as you'd expect. I think they're 12th, but they're only something like 6 points above the relegation playoff. And it's all really sort of resting on Kostic at the moment. A few people like Kabada and Pacienza chipping in as well. But yeah, they have had a drop-off, but it's one of those
expected.
It was one of the expected drop-offs, exactly.
And do we expect them to return to form under Adi Hütter? Because they were progressing nicely, weren't they, exponentially, and now sort of had the rug pulled out from underneath them with that exodus of players that Doogie was talking about, that any team that wanted to be more progressive would suffer from as a result, right?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that under Hütter they'll be okay. Like, they still put up lots of shots. He manages to get quite a lot of attack out of quite limited players. But yeah, I think when you're a club like that, you sort of have to accept the fact that you're going to mostly muddle through. And then every now and then you'll get lucky and happen to have a front line who are particularly talented and maybe they can carry you up the table. But to me, I think he's still probably done enough at Eintracht to get a move to a bigger German club in the relatively near future.
Nice. So what about Lyon then? They finished 3rd last season under Bruno Genesio, the former midfielder. Took charge in the 15-16 campaign, right? And I think pretty impressive in terms of where they placed after that. 2nd, 4th, 3rd. He was then fired and replaced with Silvinho. Now that was a disastrous period, wasn't it? I think they played 9 league games under him, only won the 2. Bit of a revival under Rudy Garcia. I don't know how much you know about that. And I suppose a little bit of feel-good has come back as a result against Juventus, but fans still not convinced with Rudy Garcia, and he's had to do it, turn the ship around without a couple of key players, right?
Well, he was a very unpopular appointment to start with because of his history with Marseille, who are obviously like key rivals of Lyon. And plus, it's just it was a bit of a dull appointment. Like originally, Silvinho, this idea was, look, maybe he's an exciting young manager. We don't know what he is exactly, but we're willing to take a gamble. After that, they were linked with Laurent Blanc, they were linked with Mourinho, of course, and then they ended up going for what people saw as a safe pair of hands. And he kind of has been. Like, they've moved up the table a little bit. They're within touching distance of the top 4 now, though you wouldn't consider them favourites to get there. And I suppose in the absence of Memphis Depay, that's like a pretty decent showing. However, they spent quite a lot of money in the summer and they're already talking about moving on from some of the players they brought in, like Yusuf Kone at left back.
René Adelaide's been injured as well, right? He made a decent start.
It did.
And then didn't score for a long time.
Jeffrey and Adelaide, like, I think they think of him as somebody who's going to be at the heart of that side going forward because he's incredibly young, he's got good key pass numbers, he's got extremely good dribble numbers. But René Adelaide is a project for the future.
Oh, say that Ren again for me.
Ren? He's a prospect for the future, like, and they paid money implying that he was going to be great for them now.
It was 23?
25, yeah.
25?
Like it was a lot, but at the same time, like if him getting injured means your season's a bust, then maybe you haven't constructed your squad properly. To me, the Depay thing is a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that Moussa Dembele's had a bit of a step back, which is probably partially a consequence of Depay and Fekir. I don't know. With Lyon, I kind of feel like they'll always basically be fine because they've got a good pipeline of players who come through. But it just seems to me like they could have gone for a really exciting appointment. We've just seen like PSV Eindhoven this week appoint Roger Schmidt,
Nice.
That is
I missed
interesting.
that.
He's been in Exodus for a long time, hasn't he?
That's it. That would have been like an interesting thing for Lyon to consider. They've got the players to play like a high pressing style, and I think that actually Ligue 1 is the sort of division where you can make a really big jump up the table if you just make the right managerial appointment. But instead, I don't know, Ola I think has been a little bit short-sighted with this one, and fundamentally I think that Lyon are much further away from the top of the table than they were.
Actually some parallels there with Spurs, isn't there? In that they seem to have lost that momentum when they were seemingly on the cusp of bigger and better things. Let's touch very briefly on Atletico. Like you said, we watched them last night and I'm quite bored of talking about them. They spent 219 mil in the summer, obviously bought in 281, losing Godin, Felipe Luis, Juanfran, Griezmann was of course the big sale, Rodri as well, and Luca Hernandez. What did we make of their business, and did we expect them to regress this much in the league, certainly, as they have done, because it's a period of high turnover?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't overwhelmed by their business, to be honest. I thought the transfer of João Felix was probably overpriced and maybe a bit early, but then if you see a player that's that promising, then maybe they tried to strike before everyone else was fully committed to the idea, so you can see why they went for that. I think the transfer that's been really impressive is Felipe, really. Because with Jimenez being injured for lots of the year, Felipe, who was a fine player at Porto, has really stepped in there and done a really good job. And then Renan Lodi's had an awesome campaign as well at left back. Particularly
he's young as well, right?
Really
Felipe's a little bit older.
Yeah, Felipe's I think in his third. I think he's just turned 30.
Yeah. Whereas
Renan Lodi's 21 or 22, and has been awesome on that left back slot because they don't really have much backup there. So they're a team in transition, and they are 6th in La Liga at the moment, but it's really tight. I think they're only 3 points off Sevilla, who are in 3rd, and they'll finish in the Champions League spots. And as we saw last night, they're still fully behind Simeone, they're still fully committed, they're still incredibly well organised. Yes, their attack could be better. Yes, they've drawn far too many games this year. I think they've drawn 12 in La Liga. But if he finds a few more sort of midfield answers or forward answers, and maybe ships off Thomas Lemar and Diego Costa this summer, reinvest that into a squad, I think they'll be fine going forward.
Okay, fair enough. Anything to add on Atleti or the Premier League at large? If we missed anyone out there by really honing in on Spurs and giving Mourinho a little bit of a rough time?
I'm not sure, man.
Probably Man City.
I'd actually say on Atleti, I don't think Atleti have taken a step back at all. I think when you look at their underlying numbers this season, they're probably the 2nd best team in the league, which is quite amazing given that level of turnover. And Felix, yeah, if it weren't for the price tag, you'd say it's been a fantastic signing. Like, he looks great at a really, really young age. It's just that he's got this insane price tag. And they kept Thomas Partey. If they can keep him again this summer, then I think you can be reasonably optimistic about them as players like Lodi and Felix continue to develop. The thing is with Atleti, for every great signing, there's always a rubbish one. Like, it's just something they always do, and I will never quite get a handle on it.
Or Diego Costa for 60 mil. Wow.
Yeah.
Good Tony the Tiger vibes from you there as well with the word great. That was really nostalgic. Let's end this section there and go on to quick fires because it's 12:15. Moving on to quick fire questions then. You guys know the rates by now, and it's Jack Egan who's kicking us off with what team has the most underrated overall squad? Instantly, what do you think?
For some reason, Leipzig and Bayern just came straight to mind. I think Bayern, we've seen it this year with their, with Süle getting injured, with Luca Hernandez being injured for a long time. Like, they've found answers to those defensive issues, and it still look fantastic. And their attack is flying at the moment.
And you think they're underrated, Bayern?
I think their squad is underrated. I don't think they're underrated as a side now. I think many people would probably say they're the Champions League favourites now. But except for backup, as in a backup at number 9, where it's Zirkzee, I think is how you pronounce it, or Jan Fetarp, where they're not so well stocked in every single position. There's now just so many options. And Leipzig too, I don't think people gave credit to their strength and depth as well. Forsberg's played more of a bit part role than ever before. Yusuf Poulsen's been on the bench a lot this year. Dani Olmo. Maybe not so much at the back, but you've got Nordi Mukiele, who can play in so many positions. Sabitzer just gone from strength to strength this year, so I think they've got both two very well-rounded squads.
And Lima, right, who when he first arrived, I think was being deployed at right back, and now looks like an absolutely banging CDM come central midfielder come box-to-box midfielder. I think he won Player of the Year in Austria, or at least
that is his position,
Player
right?
of the Year. He's reverted back to type, hasn't he? Pat, what about you? Who comes to mind first and foremost?
probably Dortmund, you know. I was actually thinking about this yesterday.
German loving.
And I was thinking, how many clubs in world football have a better set of fullbacks than Borussia Dortmund in Guerrero and Hakimi? And I was thinking, Liverpool, Real Madrid.
And why do you go straight to fullbacks? Just because you think they're the most important position in football right now?
I don't think there is a most important position in football, but their fullbacks are exceptionally good,
okay.
and they're really reliant on them. Like their fullbacks are essentially like they tuck into midfield, and to have two fullbacks who can do that to the extent that they can is remarkable. I mean, Guerrero's played as a box-to-box midfielder previously. Hakimi is just like absolutely amazing on the ball and can contribute in like the attacking phase as much as in the defensive one, and has unbelievable athletic attributes as well. But generally speaking, I mean, bringing in Emre Can in January, I think was a fantastic move. I think he's a really underrated midfielder. I think that their complement of defensive players is pretty solid as well, and obviously their attack, they've got tons. You know, like people don't even really think that much about Torgan Hazard. They don't even think that much about Julian Brandt because all the focus is on Erling Haaland and the focus is on Jadon Sancho, and that's understandable. But when you look around that squad, there's quality absolutely everywhere in it except probably goalkeeper.
Yeah, and they're finding quality. They're harvesting quality where we thought that level of quality maybe didn't exist. Witzel's had a renaissance there as well, hasn't he? He's been absolutely superb.
Well, and Gio Reyna, who's actually like
17.
a useful contributor at 17. It's
No, I
nuts.
don't think people really rated the Thomas Delaney signing last summer, and he's played really well there as well.
He hasn't been great. But he and Witzel have had a bit of a down season relative to last year, right, though, because of injury and things. But yeah, they've extracted so much more value out of those moves than they should have, really.
And Guerrero, I mean, his match intelligence has been underrated for a long, long time, and he really masked that exit of Gundogan, didn't he? Yeah, he deserves an awful lot of credit. Let's move on to Tamish Bahal's question. I didn't even pick this on purpose, but he always seems to be contributing, doesn't he?
Tamish.
Absolutely relentless. Which team is a bigger dark horse in the Champions League, Atalanta or Leipzig? Keep this relatively short.
I think people who probably are more aware of Leipzig's potential now. Everyone, has heard so much about Nagelsmann over the last couple of years. It's probably Atalanta. I mean, yeah, what a performance over 2 legs. I mean, slightly fortuitous, probably to come away with an 8-4 aggregate win. But yeah, I think they can go really far in a competition where all the front runners, bar Bayern, seem to have a bit of weakness about them. Why not Atalanta going at least to the semis? I don't think anyone will want to draw them.
What about yourself, Pat?
I'd probably say Leipzig just because I think the talent is better overall. But that said, I think it's easy to come out of this round of Champions League games and think Leipzig are maybe a little bit more solid than they are. Like they got counter-attacked a lot and looked really vulnerable at points against a Spurs side who are missing all their best attackers. I think if you just dropped Son in that Spurs side, actually Leipzig would have had some really hairy moments in that two-legged tie. But on the other hand, I think that Nagelsmann is probably more flexible than Gasperini. Atalanta are going to go out and do what they do every time. And I do think they'll get taken apart by the better sides. Leipzig, I think, are a little bit more flexible and have better centre-backs. But it's pretty marginal.
I think there's a bit more versatility to this Leipzig side. But that's not to say I wouldn't like to see Atalanta go further than Leipzig. Players like Ilicic, players like Papu Gomez, who are in their pomp right now. Your mic's dropped a little bit. Are in their pomp right now. You want them at 32, 33 to go as far in this competition as they possibly can before they decline. I think probably should have declined by now. It's absolutely amazing how they have kind of defied time, father time. Last question then in the quick fire section. It's from @Hey, it's Has _ is the recent good form of Manchester United a sign of resurgence?
It's quite annoying. I found this week, not with Man United's recent form, but people, as soon as Man United win, get at me on Twitter saying, like, you slagged off Man United for so long. There's this particular guy, will remain nameless, who's always hammering me. And I'm like, I've never said United are a really bad side. I actually think, bar midfield creativity and forward depth, like they're pretty well set. I think we've said that all season.
Yeah, I think the opening 15 games we were all stressing, were they? Defensively, okay.
Really good. And they're probably, I think expected points has put them in the top 4 pretty much all year, like around that fourth spot. And yeah, Bruno Fernandes has started fantastically well. Looks absolutely ready-made to make, a really long-term impact in the Premier League. And what a signing he looks already, although it is early days. So yeah, I think their resurgence, you add some creativity into that midfield, and it has covered a lot of, it's made up for a lot of their issues in their forward line without Rashford. So yeah, they're doing well.
Yeah, overplayed, or do you think they are actually the fourth best side, fifth best side in the Premier League?
Yeah, probably they are around there. But I mean, this idea of a resurgence, it's like they've spent an awful lot of money to accomplish like very, very little. Like, I think that I think as with most things in football, like it's just about like adding quality to your 11, and like if you have better players, you'll play better. Like if they add some key players, like especially a right winger in the summer and a better left back, then you imagine they take a step forward. But on the other hand, like this idea of like their recent good form, like I mean, they probably should have lost to Everton a couple of games ago. Like I think let's not go overboard on it. I still think that Ollie is going to hold them back to some degree.
So do you think they're going through a similar run to Arsenal in that first stint, that unbeaten streak under Unai Emery, or do you think they actually are far more, the better equipped, they're more coherent team?
I'd argue they probably have less talent than that Arsenal side, but I mean, and they're better than that, but they are better than that Arsenal side, just as a unit. I don't know. I don't know if they're similar really. I think it's more just that.
More just in the run.
My concern. I don't know. Are they on a run? Like I don't really.
Manchester United, I think they're unbeaten in 10. I want to say 10.
10, yeah.
Yeah, but then
I think
again,
only 2 goals conceded.
Arsenal are unbeaten in the Premier League, and it's like.
Celtic can be in domestic competition as well.
Should they be? Like, it's just one of those things where, like, I don't know. I don't really pay that much attention to like those sorts of runs. But I think, look, they signed somebody in a position of need. If they continue to do that, they'll get better. They're fine.
Yeah. Okay. Point I was trying to make there, I guess, is that they're probably just more. They are as solid as their numbers reflect. I don't think it's more good fortune. But they could have maybe slipped up on the way. But they haven't. Let's dive straight into personal questions then. Favourite biscuits? What a question this is.
Oh. I've always rated Jaffa cakes.
Are they biscuits?
They're the only biscuit.
What are they? Are they
like,
cake?
Really.
Maybe.
Oh, no, they're biscuits.
Okay, so already contentious. I would never classify a Jaffa cake as a biscuit.
It's not a cake though.
Yeah, it's out there. It's out there on its own.
In the shops, they're in the biscuit aisle.
How do you eat your Jaffa cake though? Do you nail everything but the
do
little orange bit?
I do take off the cake bit and then I.
Good from you.
Yeah.
Really good.
I like take it apart bit by
stupid.
bit. It does take a while though. And I
deserve the
also like custard creams as well.
Yeah, elite dunkers for tea, custard creams.
Hobnobs are good as well.
Hobnobs are good. They're like the marine
Chocolate
biscuit.
hobnobs, bang. But like,
Do you not like the regular ones?
I don't really like biscuits. I don't really see the point of biscuits.
What? Why?
Because they tend to be like, they're not actually delicious enough to make up how many calories they are. You could just have like some chocolate for the same calories. Like, or even some fruit.
I'm kind of with the pack. If they're there, I'll eat them, but I'd never buy biscuits.
That's how I feel.
But okay.
Really
so,
good like homemade cookies, great.
Yeah.
They're really good. But everything else, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. They're just always a bit
Warm
dry. A
cookies,
bit like,
lovely.
yeah, you just think like.
Yeah, I mean, I do struggle with the lack of, there is a lack of moisture in my mouth. So biscuits without tea, okay, I can take them or leave them.
Well, do you actually dip biscuits in tea?
Oh, I could go through a whole pack with a cup of tea.
That's one of the
Really?
most disgusting things.
I'm
heard.
glad that you didn't enjoy it. You're looking at me like I'm filth. That gets me off. I used to love the pink wafers. But again, is that a biscuit or is it a wafer?
You can have that as a biscuit, but that's revolting.
What else was
Do you know
there?
what are absolutely party rings?
Party rings.
They taste like crap.
They're like lacquered cardboard.
and they're so hard.
Yeah, it's like they've been laminated.
Yeah, it's always like, have these kids and like you'll have no teeth at the end of them.
That I think is one of the things that turned me against biscuits. When I was a kid, it was like, oh, we've got some biscuits, and it would be like chocolate bourbons, disgusting. Custard creams,
again, may I
probably
add.
the worst biscuit ever made.
Come on.
And party rings. Oh no, party rings are actually worse. And I was just like,
Party rings just look cool.
I was a fat child, and I was like, I'd rather be dead than eat that. Like, that is rank.
Bourbons absolutely bang for starters.
They're disgusting. They don't taste of chocolate. They taste of like dust.
I don't think what else is out there.
But for 50p, you can get about 15, and
50p.
you can fill your boots for the next hour, mate.
50p, you could get a Galaxy, fam. Like, get that.
What?
Like,
Well, it's not 1997 anymore. Galaxies are about £2.
no, they're not. They're 55p.
What, for a singular bar, though? I'm thinking big
For a
old.
single bar, yeah, of Galaxy, yeah.
I haven't seen a
55p.
chocolate bar in London for 50p in ages.
Well,
Where are you going?
Get out there, mate.
Sainsbury's.
Live a little, you hermit.
Especially at times like
Sainsbury's
this.
across the road, bro.
Right, so one favourite biscuit.
What did I say?
Custard cream?
Custard cream, yeah.
Rank.
And you're not going to, did not finish, DNF.
Disgusting. Jaffa cakes.
Okay, Jaffa cakes, and I'm going to go for, chocolate hobnob, despite not mentioning them.
They are good though.
You know, with
They
the
are good.
OT
We did
ones,
mention
well,
them.
the
We
OT
did
ones,
mention
I didn't.
Oh, right.
Didn't listen.
I was listening.
Unbelievable.
Come on, and the last personal question, censored at the Noob Master. His other name is censored.
Oh, he's always in touch.
If you could exist in any movie universe, which one would you pick?
Ooh, I'm not really like a superhero guy. Probably go like, if I could feature in Lion King, that'd be pretty class.
What would you be? What character?
do you mean?
As in like,
What
do you know when all the
animals?
all the animals are just like chilling.
What,
like,
are you
the
a human,
circle of
though?
life's in fate.
But are you a human? Like,
No, I'm an
how's it-
animal.
What animal are you?
I don't know, like a hippo or something?
Are you? I wouldn't think
What
you're a
rogue
hippo.
choice?
I'd go hyena. You and McCubbin.
No.
No.
No, they were the baddies.
Oh,
No.
fair.
They were the
So,
bad
are you one of those people that does the soundtrack make you like really nostalgic and emotional,
It's
and that's
such a
why you
good
pick the film?
Yeah, it's such a good. I mean, the Disney universe, full stop.
Right,
I just
okay.
get in any of them.
Okay.
Mulan.
Yeah,
You
that'd
can't
be
just say Disney because they own everything now.
All right. Okay, Lion King.
Okay, Lion King. That is a really weird first answer.
Probably something like spacey and fun, you know, where you could like go and do
Yeah.
weird shit. Rick and Morty, that'd be good. There you go. That's a fun universe.
Never watched
They
that.
should write you into Rick and Morty. Yeah. Okay, I
Simpsons, surely,
have
for
not
you?
thought about
Oh.
Simpsons. Simpsons is great, but I haven't probably watched it in the last 4 or 5 years.
And it's also
South
just a
Park.
town.
South Park just
They just live in a town.
Just time.
That is what happens in The Simpsons.
just because of the extremes.
do you
of
want
South
do you
Park.
want to have a suburban life with fewer fingers? Then you could be in The Simpsons.
And be yellow.
Or Chief Wiggum's severely underrated character. Absolutely hilarious.
Ralph Wiggum,
As is Ralph.
the best character.
Ralph Banks.
I like what's the guy that eats too much chocolate?
Otto.
Otto, yeah.
The German.
Yeah.
Back to the Bundesliga. No, okay. I need to think of an answer. I feel extra pressure because I actually like films. Oh no, I'm going to say something really boring like Star Wars. Yeah, just to wield a lightsaber. I've been playing the new Star Wars game recently. It's been really therapeutic,
dues.
really nostalgic. But what film universe would you like to exist in? Let us know in the comments below. That is this week's episode. We have got to get out of the pub. It's open. Can hear people upstairs. So. What should people do now, very quickly?
Go and watch Friday's Continental Club. Go over to EFD. Subscribe to all that if you've enjoyed this. Yeah.
Pat?
Check out the podcast Extra Time, available on every good podcast app. Probably bad ones too, doesn't matter. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands. You'll have noticed we said the same things by now. That was a new edition, though, actually. Go and watch one of our own as well. Goodbye.